reviewing the file before us, as well as hearing information from our residents, as well as the applicant in the city of Cuyahoga Falls. As is usual with our meetings, I know it's a bit different this year, obviously because of Zoom, but I would like to still keep with the tradition of actually standing and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'm going to stand here in a few minutes, and if you all will please join me, I would appreciate you doing so. I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I know certainly this is not our preferred way of doing business, but it's the safest way right now. And we want to be, as fair and balanced and get as much information as possible to make the best decision possible, or the best recommendation to the city council after we review the file. So before we actually go into the file, as I usually like to do, I just kind of like to explain how the process will work this evening. Sometimes when we go into these meetings, if some folks are not familiar with public meetings or government committees or council meetings, it can be a little intimidating, to be perfectly honest with you, because they're not really sure how the process is going to go. And so I try to actually demystify it a little bit, if that's okay. So after Commissioner Monaco will read the agenda into the record, we will then hear the file MAP-20-0027. We will have that file presented by the city of Cuyahoga Falls. Our planning director, Mr. Fred Guerrera, and the assistant director, Mr. Paul, will then present that information to us. Our focus will be entirely on that information, because our role as a planning commission member is to review the information presented before us and listen to the applicant and listen to the residents. That's what our job is, to ensure that the proposed file is consistent with the development code for the city of Cuyahoga Falls. Following the presentation by the city, that will then be followed by a presentation by the applicant. We will close the hearing to the city. We will open it for the applicant, and the applicant will speak on the file and present any information that they would like to provide in order to help us make the best decision possible. Once that section of the hearing is closed, we will then open it to the public. And what I would just simply ask is those members of the public who've joined us here this evening, I have just a couple quick requests. If you would like to speak on the file, I believe you can raise your hand and signify. I think John actually might be able to. Actually, yes, if you look down on the right-hand side, there's a raise your hand button. If you do wish to speak, you just have to click on that button and raise your hand. I don't know, John, is that something that I can maybe demonstrate right now?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll raise my hand. I gotta find myself there. Well, yeah, there you go. I see my hand raised there. So I will be looking for those blue hands to be recognized. And then what will happen is, once you raise your hand, I will call upon you. Hopefully the full name is there. I see we have Marvin, the sales doctor, so I'll go with Marvin if that's okay. But I will call upon that individual and then you'll be unmuted. And then you'll have about probably 2 to 3 minutes roughly, because we do have a number of folks here this evening. I try to make sure to give everybody an opportunity to finish what they have to say, but we also just want to be respectful of everybody's time here as well. And so we generally go through one round of public comment. If there's a need for an additional round, I'm certainly open to that. But my only request is to make sure that members of the public speak to the file itself. Provide us with as much information about the file so that we can make the best decision possible. That's really what our role is. We are volunteers here. We are not, paid in our positions. We are your friends, your neighbors here in the city of Cuyahoga Falls. And our job is to listen, to get as much information as possible to make the best decision and recommendation as possible. So that's what our role is. I hope that kind of helps explain the whole process here about what everybody's role is. Once the public commentary is closed for the public, we will then open it up to the members of the Planning Commission. And then the Planning Commission members will each have an opportunity to ask questions of either the city or the applicant, again, to get as much information as possible. And then following that, we, one way or the other, will probably have a motion on the particular file and move forward with our decision. So that's really the process for tonight's hearing. I hope that's helpful background information. At any point in time, anybody has any problem with technology, please, again, just raise your hand. Let us know. We have the very capable John from the city of Cuyahoga Falls. He's our technology expert. And we also have other people who can assist us in this regard. So I know this is a bit different format. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And with that, Commissioner Monaco, if you could please read the agenda into the record, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Guerrero, could you put that up on
Sure.
the shared screen, please?
Give me 1 second here. Things around here. We'll get to it here in a second. There we go. You see
There we
that?
go.
We'll make it larger. I'll make it larger.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Today's agenda items, new business, section 1113.07 zoning map amendment. The applicant, Petros Development Group, is requesting a map amendment for parcel 37-00221-508 State Road. The parcel is currently zoned MU1 Rural Neighborhood Center. The applicant is requesting a map amendment to R5 Mixed Density Residential. The applicant is proposing a 49-unit owner-occupied townhome community, which is under new business MAP-20-000027. Second item are the minutes from the August 18, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. End of agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Monaco. We will now move forward and open the hearing to the city of Cuyahoga Falls. And Planning Director Guerrero, if you would, you have the talking stick here. Please proceed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rice. I will go through the staff report here as quick as possible. Again, this is a zoning map amendment. It's for 5008 State Road. The property is approximately 12.3 acres. Petros Development Group is the applicant. Greg Modick from Petros Homes is the representative, and the property owner is Marion and Robert Crudy. Staff report, this PowerPoint is partially a staff report, in part history lesson. It helps out that you know the history. The more I can do here, the meeting, than I can do in the staff report. You can see the arrow here showing the property. It's at the northern end of the city. Hidden Lakes is behind it, and you can see the light purple area is the MU1. The RM overlay is Hidden Lakes and with Boulder Estates. This property actually, we always say it Northampton Township, Ward 8. It was actually Boston Township. It was annexed into the city in 2003, 2004. And the reason for that was the original developer of the property could not develop it with limited resources of Boston Township. There wasn't, they didn't have utilities. They didn't have police, fire services who could service this area. And the developer asked the city if they can annex into the city. They did. In return, we created a joint economic development district on Akron Cleveland Road all the way up to Boston Heights. So in return for the annex, we created the joint economic development district with Boston Township. The zoning right now is MU1. They're requesting R5, and then the area closest to it is the R3 RM, which is the overlay district. And so I just want to go over the zoning so everybody understands what's allowed now and what they would like to do. So it's MU1, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but MU1 is what we call rural neighborhood center. And when you link it with a higher density neighborhood, we call it a hamlet, and we'll talk more about that. But an MU1, right now, if it was get developed as an MU1, there's only two type of residential uses that could be developed on the site. One is live work units. You know, these are 2-3 story buildings where somebody has a shop on the first floor and they live above the shop. The other is a mixed use building, and that could be 2, 3, 4 story building with retail on the first floor. And then in that retail, that is how it's composed. So on that first floor, what could be in that first floor are offices, convenience stores. I'm not quite sure how you can get a garden center, but you could have part of the garden center in there, and then beside it, you have the open area of the garden center. A service station, drive-through establishment, nursing homes, dry cleaners, bed and breakfast facilities, funeral homes, veterinarians, bars, wireless towers, and you can put a hospital, schools, and public assembly in an MU1. In an R5, what they're asking for is it's just residential, with one exception. We'll get to that in a minute. You can do single family detached. You can do single family attached residential. As what they're proposing, you can do multifamily residential. You can build a school or have a public building, public assembly, a church, for example. You can have a nursing home, and you can have a wireless tower. And then in what Hidden Lakes and Boulder is, it's pretty much the R5 district, but you can allow single family residential attached, single family detached, multifamily, schools, public assembly, and towers. And so the R5 is not that much different than the R3. What the R3 tries to do is create an R5 district. When we look at the zoning districts, I want to spend a little time on this. You can see when we separated the city, we separated into planning areas, and this is the Northampton planning area. And what we try to encourage in those areas are the MU developments, both 3 and 1, R5, R2, and R1. In this case, this will be an R5, and then mixed density residential overlays. So when we created how the city will grow, we have different standards for different zoning districts. In Northampton, again, this particular case, we're dealing with MU1 and the R5 and some mixed density residential. Our housing priorities in Northampton were really mixed residential density subdivisions like Hidden Lakes, like Boulder, like Buckeye, hamlets, which we'll talk about, and then low density residential. So this project, again, this is just the preliminary with what they're proposing. It hasn't been through any vetting. Is they want to build condominiums in this site, and 49 of them. And you can see on the left is the site plan, the preliminary site plan, and on the right is what those buildings would look like. I know it's hard when you see these renderings. You always say, what do they really look like? So what they actually have some units that are similar that they're building in Fairlawn, in Riviera, and these are similar, and the applicant could talk about that. I just found these on the web page, that these are similar units to what they want to build here. So let's start with the review criteria that we do every staff report. First thing that we look at is the proposed zoning map amendment in accordance with the general development characteristics and policies of the general plan and other plans or program of the city adopted under the general guidance of the general plan. Well, when we look at this area and when we did the general plan and we did the charrettes, is we created an area here that we called that we called the Tamsin Park neighborhood, this yellow mustard color area. And in that area, then we created at the intersections here, Tamsin Square, which we called it, which is the mixed use. So when we were doing development, and we'll talk a little bit more about what type of development we wanted there, and the overlays are higher density, basically, mixed density. We want to see development meet those standards of what we created. And so the zoning map amendment application is located in the Tamsin Park neighborhood and is part of the Tamsin Square mixed use district. Hidden Lakes neighborhood was developed as an RM mixed density overlay in this development area. These policies were created during the Ward 8 Charrette process and formalized in the general development plan and code. A little bit about the charrette, everybody asked about it. We did a week-long design charrette for Ward 8, and in which the city, Gould Evans, and the National Park sort of coordinated the charrette. And we looked at key areas, how we want things developed. In the plan, when we looked at it, there are four main goals: was preserve Northampton area's remaining natural resources, maximize positive land use impacts that include clustering, hamlets, and rural development patterns, provide networks for pedestrian and bicyclists that are good as the network for motorists, create opportunities for clean and green industrial. Those were the main categories. When we got out of the charrette, we had a whole bunch of recommendations that we sort of we codified, most of them. But if we look at this particular project, you can see one of the things that people did like was encourage condominiums in the ward. They thought that this was a good way to preserve space. You know, you don't have, you know, half-acre, acre-and-a-half lots. You have basically green space around condominium buildings. It protect as much trees and open space as possible. And we had developed the Tamsin Park properly. There are a number of other things. I won't go through them. When we look at the process, how it works, we did the ward charrettes. We separated the city into 4 planning areas. In those areas, we looked at land use, housing, circulation, open space, and employment. We then developed the general plan. We had individual area plans that we also developed. And then we developed a development code with subdivision requirements, zoning requirements, and design requirements, all based on what happened in the charrettes. Tamsin Park area, we spent a lot of work on it. In the plan, we actually wanted to look what the hamlet would look like. And as you can see, this light purple area is the hamlet area, mixed uses, small retail, shops above it, and behind it was different types of residential development. We also had a design by Alan Burge. We also had a design by Alan Burge, who looked at both Boulder and Hidden Lakes to see how it can be developed. And as you can see, is this the mustard color area was attached for multifamily, and behind that were the larger lots. And that's the idea of it. Again, when we look at how these work together, MU1 Rural Neighborhood Center is where people can walk and have retail and have higher density. It then goes into an R5 mixed density residential area. The urban residential district integrates into a mixed use urban environment, buffers low density neighborhoods from busy corridors. It's characterized by a range of dwelling types, smaller lots, and high pedestrian connectivity. And then when you put those together, you create the hamlet. of an MU1 district with an RM or R5 neighborhood. That creates the hamlet. So the first one we did actually was Hidden Lakes. And this was, the underlying zoning was R3. It was approved as a mixed density overlay, trying to take in those things that we just talked about. And Hidden Lakes, commercial areas are not there yet, but the residential portions are there. And the townhomes, small single family lots, and eventually out in front would be adjacent mixed use commercial. And there were two private developers, Ryan and Pulte, and the city gave no incentives. There were no incentives involved in this project. So second review criteria is a proposed map amendment in accordance with the general development patterns and characters of the planning area in which the land is located. The proposed amendment is consistent with development patterns in Hidden Lakes and the mixed density designations in the area. There are townhomes in Hidden Lakes, that was part of it. And there were smaller lots. In Boulder, they're all smaller lots, different size, smaller lots. And so the Hidden Lakes and Boulder Estates have been developed in the Thompson Square District and Salt Creek in the Thompson Park neighborhood. If you combine these three developments that occurred based on the changes we made to the code and the annexation, there are 468 mixed density housing units here, about $117 million worth of investment since 2005. 2000 to 2017 of these two neighborhoods, you can see the county has actually lot lines, but there's nothing there. It was still Thompson Park back then. And as you can see the difference in 2017 with the housing. So again, the first two criteria, it meets our long range plans, it meets code requirements, and then it also is consistent with what is already there. The third review criteria is a proposed map amendment in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. It's always a tough question. What is public health, safety, and welfare? Well, in zoning and planning, it could be different, not necessarily the same as when you think of it in a different context. But one of the things how we look at that is, does it meet our long range plans, what we want to do? The long range plan is helping with the city's public health, safety, and welfare. It improves the city as development occurs. It meets those long range plans. Second item is the proposed development of the zoning map amendment area will create new development that meets Cuyahoga Falls development code requirements. We want to see development. We want to see proper development. It meets those requirements. The proposed map amendment is also harmonious with adjacent subdivisions and the adjacent MU1 zoning. We talked about that. One of the things that I'm starting to do now is use this Urban Land Institute Quickway impact assessment. It's just a snapshot, gives you an idea to compare developments, what that footprint, what it's going to create on the property. And so when we look at that, we see that when it's a residential development, we're looking at a construction value of about $10 million, $10.2 million, $10.3 million. It's 49 units. Total population would add about 138 people. On these numbers, it's hard to tell. It doesn't differentiate whether these people are going to be empty nesters, retirees, or younger couples. It just looks at 120 based on bedrooms, how many people you would get. And so it does show that there would be 22 students in Hudson School District, and that would require, this shows 3 city employees. I don't think that number would be as high, but that's what this shows. Again, this is just what it's called a Quickway analysis. It'll create about 138 jobs, and what everybody's always interested is external trip generation. This one come up with 294 cars a day. The developer also had Prime AE, Eric Smith, do a quick analysis, and he had weekdays 330 cars. So we are pretty close to how many cars would be coming in and out of this development. If we look at the mixed use, and I use just a small amount of numbers just to show you what those numbers would be. 10,000 square feet of retail and 30 units. And this would be one building, basically, with maybe 3 stories. At 12 acres, you can fit more than 10,000 square foot footprint. But just to show if there was one building there, you know, it could be the first phase of it. It would add 53 people. It wouldn't, because there's not as many people there, it wouldn't create the need for additional employees for either the school or the city. In the economic development analysis is it would create 52 construction jobs and 25 permanent jobs. And it goes through here, and I won't spend time on that, about how those numbers are, you know, shopping and things like that. I just wanted to give you an idea, but it creates more traffic. You got to remember that an MU district will create more traffic. It creates over 700 cars a day, and that's only with 10,000. And so that's just, as we look at this and what the benefits for the community is, what the disadvantages are, and it just analyzes those two different, if it wasn't rezoned. The next review criteria is the proposed map amendment consistent with the planning criteria of the proposed new zoning district and is consistent with the planning criteria of all adjacent existing zoning districts. This table in the code, 2 items are not applicable. The 2 that are, any area in a CR or NH planning area within a half mile of a mixed use center is appropriate for R5 zoning. MU is within maybe 500 feet. The next item is attached single family building shall create a transition between multifamily and single family. And the way the transition works is if you have a corridor like State Road and you have a mixed use in the front, you typically don't like to have a single family right behind the mixed use. You want to step it down in density. So what you would have is the mixed use, you would have a multifamily or attached single family, and then you would have single family. And so it does create that transition to some of the Hidden Lakes single family, but that is the way the transition is supposed to work. Review criteria 5 and 6. Do the plans submitted in association with the map amendment meet all standards of the zoning design regulations for the proposed zoning district? The preliminary plans are not adequate for us to determine, does it meet all the design criteria? Does it meet setbacks? We don't have enough information. There's enough room on the site that they should be able to do that, but that has not been reviewed. Is the applicant in conformance with subdivision regulations? Again, they have to meet subdivision regulations right now. It's a pretty picture of a road and some sites. So we really didn't review it for that. Can they meet those standards? Yes, they can. We will make sure they meet those standards, but at this point, it's just a basic site plan and a sketch of what those buildings would look like. So as we look at the findings from our review criteria, so if we look at the first review criteria, is the proposed zoning map amendment in accordance with the general development characteristics and policies of the general plan and any other plan or program of the city adopted under general guidance of the general plan? Is yes, it meets what RM overlay is. It does everything the RM overlay does, and it's consistent with the attached units in Hidden Lakes, and it meets. It also meets the layering of how residential would get less dense as it moves west. And the general plan calls for walkable residential neighborhoods with attached neighborhood mixed use centers. The zoning map amendment does not alter this goal. And again, so it meets the first criteria. Is a proposed map amendment in accordance with the general development patterns, characteristics of the planning area in which the land is located. The map amendment will allow for medium density attached and detached housing, which is consistent with the development pattern in the area. The proposed development is also consistent with the Tamsin Park neighborhood goals. Third item is a proposed map amendment in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The proposed development will provide new housing investment in the city. The impact analysis shows that the residential development has a bigger immediate investment impact and a long-term consumer spending impact to the community. However, the mixed-use development would create jobs, wages for local residents, and income tax from these jobs. Also, the residential development creates less traffic than a mixed-use development. Finally, is a proposed map amendment consistent with the planning criteria of the proposed new zoning districts and consistent with the planning criteria of adjacent zoning districts. The zoning map amendment meets 113207 R5 mixed density residential planning criteria. And staff will require a developer when we get to the subdivision to make sure that there are mixed use elements in the entryway for this development. So it fits in what the overall goal for this area is. So we look at alternatives. So what if, we talked about this alternative early on. Why don't we just add this to the Hidden Lakes mixed use overlay district? That's an option. You can add on to those districts. We just felt that the R5 was cleaner. It gives you the same results. And there was no direct access. We should have had a stub street going into this property from Hidden Lakes, and then we could have made a better case for it. There will be some connections on Akron Cleveland Road with sidewalks, but there was no direct what we like to see. But it could have been done, and we could have been here talking about that. The other option is the applicant keep the front of the property zone MU1 and the rear to R5. We think this is more appropriate where it's at now in front of Hidden Lakes. There's properties there where the wine mill is. That's closer to the center of it, which is the triangle. Because Pulte built their model home and other houses, they stopped that connection of mixed use in Hidden Lakes. And so we think that at this property, it would then create higher density in the back of it if you have mixed use in the front. And the mixed use will also create more traffic than on State Road right now. Or finally, don't do anything. Just let it stay, wait for the right development, and they come there. It would be a mixed use structure. Probably it could be a building, several buildings, retail on the first floor, apartments above it, and maybe some live work units. You never know when a developer finds a property and that's what they want to do, but or it could even be potentially a convenience store with residential above it, with parking. That's the other thing, is you have to have parking on these things. So those are the three alternatives that we're faced with. So based on everything, the planning staff concludes that a map amendment is warranted because it meets all general plan criteria for the Tamsin Park District, the Tamsin Park neighborhood, and the Northampton Planning District goals, long-range plans, and policies. A map amendment meets R5 mixed density residential planning criteria, while attached single family is also consistent with current land use characteristics in Hidden Lakes. Finally, the impact analysis indicates that an attached single family development is a larger private investment with less traffic than a mixed use development. Based on the above facts and other facts in the staff report and file, the planning staff recommends an R5 mixed density zoning map amendment for parcel 37-00221. And on the right is basically that put in a motion based on our recommendation as a sample. And that completes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guerrera. I appreciate that very thorough report, and as well as the background information regarding kind of how we got here from a planning perspective. So that was very helpful. So at this point in time, I'm going to close the hearing to the city of Cuyahoga Falls and open it up to the applicant. So Mr. Modick, I believe that that would be you, sir. If you would not mind, and this is for everybody who is actually speaking during this hearing, just please state your name and address for the record. Please speak slowly, although John, I know this is being recorded, but I always want to be careful of Lori because Lori's got a tough job here to capture everything. So please speak slowly and state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Greg Modick with Petros Development Group, 10474 Broadview Road, Broadview Heights, Ohio. And whoever the host is, I sincerely apologize. I was originally signed in and attempting to do this via my computer so I could share the screen a little bit better, but technology is getting me. So plan B is the iPad. I have it here, and thank you for your time this evening. It's good to see everybody. It's been a while, so this is a little different format. We're really excited about this project. You know, as we identified the parcel and began to study it, our mind first came to the success of what was next door at Hidden Lakes, residential. Certainly, we're well aware of the concerns that were raised pertaining to traffic, not only by some residents during our application process, but prior to as well, talking to the administration there. We're confident that the use we have in front of you tonight is the least impactful use that could happen with this property from the traffic perspective. But importantly, what we're excited to bring here is a local builder, over 30 years of success. It's our partner company here, Petros Homes, building quality townhome products on this site. We feel it's just a really great fit for kind of an extension and building upon Hidden Lakes. Least impact to the neighbors as well, as far as use too. Some of the uses that Fred put up there earlier on his slides certainly I think would be a little more offensive potentially as far as a use perspective next to a residential community there. With regards to Fred's report and meeting the criteria for the subdivision regulations, you know, as this became a rezoning, I know by the code, typically a plan's not even required, you just request a rezoning, but we thought it was important to show a high level of detail, being our density, our product, our site plan, and the elevations. Certainly, you know, I have some history here at Cuyahoga Falls and the zoning regulations, as well as the design regulations on engineering. And, you know, there's zero doubt in my mind that we can adhere to all those on future submissions should this be rezoned. And, you know, I know that there was conversations early on pertaining to, is this going with the overlay, tying it to what was the overlay for Hidden Lakes, or was it, you know, a rezoning? As it became rezoning, I did speak with the ward councilman, Mr. Stams, and I know there was some concerns that were brought to his attention pertaining to, well, what happens if we start with this project and decide to stop with this project and it's just been rezoned to R5 and let's build those apartments and 15 units an acre or whatever the density may allow. I've committed to Mr. Stams. I've mentioned it to Mr. Guerrera. I think there's maybe some working out to do with the city for the most appropriate mechanism, whether it be a deed restriction or a development agreement. But this is our plan. I'd have no problem, you know, restricting the property such that it is this density. We have zero intent of, you know, trying to switch something out in the future, but I certainly recognize the concern that could happen. So as we proposed this, we accepted the guidance of the city with regards to the rezoning process and feel that it is probably the most appropriate route to accomplish what our goal is, given the choices that Mr. Guerrero pointed out. And we're willing to work with the city with regards to the mixed use elements in the front and any other way we can. I know I did speak with Mr. Damasi, and you know, we would work with the city for providing, whether it be easement or right-of-way access along our frontage for any sort of future, whether it's a year away, 2 years away, 10 years away, potential widening of pavement or need for additional right-of-way out there at this time. So with that, I will, stop talking for the moment and entertain any questions that may come from the board or the residents that would come into play tonight. Certainly, as we've always done, we're willing to work with the board, with the residents, and trying to accomplish addressing any concerns that may arise either during the meetings or throughout the development process as well. So thank you all very much for your time and consideration in this very unique way to hold meetings these days.
Thank you very much, Mr. Modak, and I appreciate your willingness to answer any questions that may come as a result of this conversation from either the residents or from the members of the Planning Commission. So thank you for making yourself available. At this point in time, I'm going to close the hearing to the applicant, and we will be opening the hearing to our public members who've joined us here on the Zoom call. And before we roll into that portion, again, just a reminder of a couple things. One, if folks could just, if you would like to make a statement or provide us with information about this particular file, all you need to do is hit that little icon there on the lower right-hand side that says raise your hand, and I will call on you, and our very able technology expert will unmute you. And if you would then at that point in time, please state your name and address for the record. And then you have a couple minutes there, 2 or 3 minutes to share your thoughts or new information with us. Or if you have a question that we can help provide additional information with. So that's how the process will flow here this evening. And so at this point in time, again, if you could just please direct all your comments regarding the file, either to the city or the applicant, and we will get those questions answered and look forward to your input. So at this point in time, the public portion of the hearing is open. I'm looking to see if we have anybody who's expressed an interest in. I see one hand up there. Chantel Permenter. I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Chantel. I apologize in advance. So if you again, please state your name and address for the record, and please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is actually Dana Parmenter. This is her husband. So it just Zoom had logged her in apparently and not me. So Dana Parmenter, 9 Hidden Lake Lane. I did have a question. There was a comment that was made, and I want to just clarify. There was a discussion around extending the overlay from in a Hidden Lake neighborhood. And effectively, it was decided this was a more suitable alternative. Now, as was highlighted in the discussion with Mr. Stams, I think what is of interest is, again, we're trusting that this is the plan that's going forward. And of course, the business that's producing it, we would expect to hopefully be able to complete that. But we raised the risk, and you mentioned deed restrictions. But is there a specific reason why that other alternative wouldn't have been a more suitable approach? Was there a density restriction on that? Was there something that prevented that from carrying? Because one of the highlights I saw in the question said that there was no direct roadway or walkways, but then there was a comment made that a sidewalk would be extended. So I'm not sure if that was the only restriction on doing that, but that seems like that may have been a reasonable approach to developing that. Is there something further?
Mr. Guerrera, would you be?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that we would have to take a look at the Hidden Lakes overlay. There's a master plan that has to be done. And then we'd have to link it in to the master plan. And the results is the same. At the end of the day, if these units get built as attached, they wouldn't be any different than it was adding onto the overlay. And because there wasn't, usually when we do this, we like to see street connections. It's like phase 2 of a development. We like to see street connections. We'd like to see sidewalks. And there wasn't a clear way to do that. The only way at this point that we see is just having a sidewalk on State Road. It would have been much easier, like I said, if there was a stub. We tried to put a stub in this neighborhood. And I forget the name of the street when it goes down into the lower area, and because of topography, it was hard to do that. And so we just made a choice. We just said we think it's just cleaner to do the R5 rather than to extend the district. We could have done that, and we could have been sitting here talking about that. It's almost the same process. It's amending the overlay, which changes the zoning, and then you still have to go through subdivision approval. And so we just thought this was just simpler to do. That's all.
Understood. And I guess that was my question on that is I understand the ability to use property and things and build, so I'm not adamantly opposed to building something, and I'm happy to see State Road further develop. I think it helps the overall area, but I think the idea that we had, and I guess maybe that, Mr. Modic has shared it from Petros, but maybe you can define what process is available then from preventing if, Petros unfortunately were to be out of business and the property back on the market, what keeps us from having a apartment building like the other R5 on Wyoga Lake?
I guess I can try to answer that. I think a couple things. First is and the attorneys would have to work this out. Is there a restriction that we put on the property before construction? I see Matt smiling here, but that would be something I think potentially we can do, is that once the development gets done, then that restriction's taken off of there, or that it stays with the property, that it can only be attached single family. The other option is, it's not as clean of an option, but this still has to come back to the planning commission 2 more times, preliminary subdivision and final subdivision. If they came back to the planning commission and said, we want to build apartments, it's site plan approval. And so the planning commission could turn it down because it didn't meet the standards. That gets a little dicey too. So I think the cleanest thing is the developer, and I'm not quite sure what their time frame is. Maybe Greg or Sam could talk about that, but is to have something there in place until construction is done, as some type of something on the deed.
But does that answer your question, Dana? Mr. Parmenter, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. For that question, I think that makes sense. That answers my question on that for now. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you very much. It looks like we have the Turners, but I see 2 people there. So if whoever wants to speak, just please, again, state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, this is Matt Turner, 7 Hidden Lake Lane. I had a question for Mr. Modic. I was curious how close the buildings are at the front of the development to our property line. It looks like near the front of the development, they're much closer, and then at the rear of the development, there's more space. So I was wondering how close they are planned to be, and if they could be moved any further north, or if possibly there could be a tree line put in to have a little separation there.
Mr. Rice Mayor.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please feel free to respond. Yeah. It's a
New
question
format.
not for me.
Yeah, I didn't want to overstep. So,
No.
yeah, so in the front of the entrance there, we did try to keep it as far away as possible. Currently, it's at a 40-foot setback to the property line. What's driving that is the cross topography from that common property line with Hidden Lakes, then heading to the north. It drops off quite significantly. So our setback is 40 feet, but it puts it approximately 130 to 140 feet from the existing houses. With regards to the tree line, I would be willing to add some additional trees. I'd say that on our properties, we create a slope. I don't know the most appropriate trees at this point, but if those residents abutting or adjacent there have even a little bit of space in their backyard, we would be willing to plant and place some trees within that location if possible, and work collaboratively with them.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Modic. Does that answer your question, Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Okay, super. And John, I guess you can put their hand down, I guess. Thank you, John. Councilman Stams.
Thank you, Mr. Rice, and thank you everybody for their time this evening. My concern, this is Frank Stams, 3290 Forest Meadow. I am the councilman for Ward 8. And my biggest concern for the residents of the area is you mentioned the traffic out front. I know the traffic out there at the mouth of Hidden Lakes is is a concern now with the addition of almost 50 units or houses. I can't, common sense just tells me that traffic is going to be even more of a concern. Maybe Mr. Guerra or Mr. Modic can let me know, or let the residents know what is being done, or what can be done at the mouth of that egress and regress that will be the most safety, provide the biggest safety for the residents there.
Mr. Guerrero, does that make sense? Should you take the lead? on
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Stans. We have been talking about this for a long time, and I know some of the people that live in Hidden Lakes know that we've been looking at different alternatives. I think whether this development is occurring or not, I think something, and the city believes that something will eventually need to be done with this area. The good thing about this development is it doesn't create that much traffic compared to some other traffic. But I think we need, as a city, to look at different alternatives to improve traffic flow, especially in the mornings, which is really bad, and maybe not as bad in the afternoons because it's more dispersed than in the mornings. And so I think that's something that we should do as a city, as this moves forward, and look at. I've talked over with the city engineer about different alternatives and the development director, and I think we sort of have a handle on it. And I've talked also potentially with Greg on some things, and I think maybe when it gets to the subdivision portion, maybe we can have some suggestions of how to do things. We haven't looked at the engineering yet. We haven't, even though they do have the traffic engineer involved, we really haven't talked about it as much. It's just that problem, no matter what happens. If something happened in Boston Township was built there, we'd have the same issue. So we just need to deal with that no matter what. I don't think it affects the zoning. It shouldn't, because if this wasn't even rezoned and someone was doing a mixed use, we would eventually have to deal with it. So I think there are things we can do. We just have to follow up on it.
Mr. Modic, is this where it might be, I mean, it's certainly your call, but is this where possibly Mr. Smith might be able to weigh in? Because I think he's on the call, and I know Mr. Smith. I've worked with him in the past. Is this possibly where he could weigh in with possibly his thoughts?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate. Eric Smith, we hired him and started early on with him to understand, again, being aware of the traffic situation, talking to the city. I just want to point out real quick before I hand it over to him, his involvement was to identify what would our site generate and what is the potential impact to the existing infrastructure. And it shows, as Mr. Guerrero's report did as well, that, the proposal we'll put forth is less of a traffic impact than the current zoning allows. So I'll let Mr. Smith speak to that. He is by all means the expert with regards to it. And I do want to also end by saying, I've been in conversation with Mr. Damasi, the city engineer, and, we'd work with them on our design and our development any way necessary.
Mr. Modic. Eric, can you, John, if you could please unmute Mr. Eric Smith?
Yeah, I've tried to unmute him. It's not unmuting.
Okay.
I believe Mr. Smith is on his phone, and Eric, if you can hear me, excuse me, Eric, if you can hear me, if you hit *6 on your phone, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Well, while we're doing that, Councilman, I appreciate you raising that issue. This is something that has come before Planning Commission on a number of occasions, and I'm glad you raised it, and I will have comments about that when we get to the Planning Commission portion. But thank you for raising it, and rest assured it's something that is going to get further attention. So thank you, Councilman.
You're what? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. And if I may, Julia Tuttle had sent a chat out to the group. I don't know if you've seen that. She doesn't have the raise her hand function on her computer, but she just wanted to add the traffic with the schools on Seasons and Wyoga Lake Road is horrible. Accidents waiting to happen. Just to add to that, any additional, I think, traffic in that area is going to make a bad situation even worse. So I do appreciate you recognizing the issue there, Mr. Rice, and thank you for your comment that you will certainly make it a priority going forward.
You're welcome, sir. And I did see her chat, and I was going to respond to that. And actually, thank you for mentioning that. We have a policy of not responding to the chat. And the reason for that is because the people on the radio actually can't see that. And so thank you for actually reading that, Councilman. So what I would basically, John, if you've got any thoughts about how we can address that, or maybe I can just do what the councilman did, that I could actually just read their comments. And certainly, Councilman, thank you so much for doing that. But we are not going to be utilizing the chat function from an official capacity. And the reasoning for that is it's a public records sunshine law issue. We want to make sure that everybody has access to the same information. So hopefully.
Yeah, I think reading that would probably be appropriate.
Okay, that's what I'll do then. And I think certainly the councilman already did that. So thank you so much, Councilman. I appreciate that. We'll now go to Mr. Ryan Hopkins is our next member from the public who would like to speak. Again, if you could please just state your name and address for the record, sir, Mr. Hopkins.
All right, this is Ryan and Amy Hopkins. We live in the back on 5025 Hidden Hollow Court. So my question is pretty similar to Mr. Turner's. It's probably going to be more directed to Mr. Maddox, but concerning the setback. So when I look at your proposal, your map, looks like there's going to be a water retention pond close to my backyard. So my question is, again, what's that offset? And I think you've probably seen a topography back here. There's a pretty decent size, little hill. Are you guys going to bulldoze into that topography, into that hill? And, what's that setback for that retention pond from my property line? And I think Julie Tuttle's, as well as, I think there's going to be 4 of our neighbors that will be impacted by this.
Mr. Modick, would you like to address that, sir?
Yes, thank you. Looking at that site over there, the water retention pond as shown is approximately 15 to 20 feet off the property line. It would be our intention to regrade that area of the existing mound down there and shape our retention pond. The pond will be oversized. We're certainly very well aware of stormwater issues associated with development. We've worked collaboratively hand in hand with the city on numerous projects here to ensure that we don't just meet the code requirements, but exceed them as well. What that would do then is, beyond the stormwater management pond, the separation between those existing homes on Hidden Hollow Court and the new proposed units is approximately 180 feet, if that helps from a reference perspective as well.
Thank you, Mr. Modick. Does that answer your question, Mr. Hopkins? John, I think you have to unmute him again.
Give me a second. Which one? I'm sorry, which one was that?
Ryan Hopkins, please.
Got it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks for letting me unmute myself. Yeah, that answer is, I was just, the biggest thing was that hill. I wasn't sure, up to my property line, if it would be excavated or if they leave some of that mound, that 20-foot setback. I'm speaking for everyone on Hill, really for anyone that borders up against it, but primarily that retention pond, essentially in our backyard. So yeah, that helps.
Good. And then for my clarification, again, Mr. Guerra, I'm assuming, again, would be another detail that would be really worked out in more specificity as we move to the site plan review, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So Mr. Hopkins, I really appreciate you raising that. And please know that as we move forward, we do remember these issues that are raised at this level. And then we make sure that they are addressed as we move forward. So thank you so much. Our next public member to speak would be Marvin, who has the best tagline in the world, the sales doctor. Mr. Marvin, if you would mind, just please stating your name and address for the record, sir.
Marvin Montgomery. I live at 5 Hidden Lake Lane. I'm the second house on the right as you pull in. I just wanted to really reinforce, and I don't know if, I think the one person really commented on the traffic out front as an accident getting ready to happen. Being the second house in, it's I think it's even understated, because in the morning, even trying to get out of our development to go to work between 8 and 9, you're taking your life into your hands because you don't know if you can get out or not. So if we do add 250 to 300 more cars in another entrance out onto State Road without something being done, and does that mean there's going to be 2 traffic lights, one for them and one for us? Hopefully there's going to be some type of traffic study that's going to be done. I know since I've been here, I've made several inquiries about a traffic light, and I've been told that there's no traffic light in the future for out front here. So it's kind of disconcerting to find that we're going to put more houses there, but without any kind of consideration of putting a light out front to slow that traffic down, because it's not just the traffic, it's actually the speed of the traffic too. Because when they pull down past our entranceway, I mean, they're going 55 to 60 miles an hour through that intersection there. And that's on a good day. So I just wanted to just reinforce the importance of the way the traffic flow is now, and to add more traffic out there without some type of safety being applied. It won't be an accident waiting to happen. There will be accident.
Thank you very much, Mr. Montgomery. Mr. Guerra, would you like to respond at all? Or
the city realizes we understand all the issues. I think we just have to figure out how to take care of that traffic. I mean, a lot of it's not even in the city, and if it's coming down Akron-Cleveland Road, something has to be done prior to whether it even gets here. So it's not an easy solution, but I think we can make it better, hopefully, with some study of the area. There were times where there was a plan at one point, one of the county engineers, to have a roundabout there, and we looked at that roundabout, and no one was really sure that was going to help. So I think we just need to put our heads together and figure something out.
thank you, Mr. Guerra. And again, Mr. Montgomery, I appreciate you reiterating that. I mean, there are 2 issues that at least always are very prominent in our meetings. One is definitely stormwater management, retention ponds, and the second one is traffic. And we're hearing very loud and clear those concerns here this evening. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, it looks like Miss Julia Tuttle, you were able to get your hand raised there. So you are our next public speaker. And if you again would not mind, please stating your name and address for the record, Julia.
Julia Tuttle, 5017 Hidden Hollow Court. And there are a couple items I wanted to ask about. One is we're concerned about the noise level. If you're adding 50 townhomes, as far as, well, we know there's going to be more traffic, but also going to be more noise. That's what we're concerned about. And also my property and several others that surround the back end of the property, we get a lot of drainage from the property now. And I want to know what the developer plans on doing, maybe put in some drains or re-landscape it. And also I thought of, I know the city says they have no plans at this time to deal with the traffic, but there needs to also be the main road there, the Akron Cleveland Road, needs to be 4 lanes, because right now it's only 2, and you've got Route 8 traffic coming down from Cleveland and other areas, suburbs, going to that school. And also at night too, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the same thing. It's just traffic jams all the time. And you also have people that are working in Cleveland that travel that road as well. So it really is a bad situation. And if you add more traffic, more people going to work or going to school, it's just going to make it worse. It needs to be widened, I think, to begin with. And that triangle there, which belongs to somebody, it would be great if the city could do something with that and put a traffic light in. So those are my issues: is the noise, the drainage, and of course widening the road and traffic light.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Tuttle. I appreciate you sharing those concerns. And thank you for summarizing those, because that's extremely helpful as well. Before we kind of pivot to either Mr. Modak or Mr. Guerrero, I just want to remind everybody that these are all very important issues for us as a planning commission. And you all are already at the next step, to be perfectly honest with you, because these are issues that will be fleshed out in the actual site plan. So I appreciate you guys raising them. So thank you very much. That's great. But just know that part of the fact that we don't have the answers tonight, it's because we just haven't really fleshed out those plans and details. It's not that Fred hasn't done his job or Mr. Modak hasn't done his job. Excuse me, Mr. Guerrero hasn't done his job. We're just not there yet. And please know that by raising them here, it raises it on our radar screen. And it's something we definitely will pay attention to. And really tonight's purpose is really, is this consistent with our zoning? That's really what the question for us tonight is. And if I could just get some clarification, Ms. Tuttle, when you say noise level, is your question regarding noise level, is it related to road noise, ma'am?
No, well, not so much traffic noise, but if you have 50 units, of course you're going to have cars coming and going. I'm talking about like if people have parties or, other things going on. I'm thinking there's not going to be any tennis courts or pools there or anything like that, right? I'm assuming there isn't going to be. If you have those 2 items, then you're going to have additional traffic and additional noise, things like that.
Yeah. Mr. Modak was shaking his head. I mean, it doesn't appear as that there's going to be any tennis courts or swimming pools. So I don't think from any outdoor activity. Mr. Modak, can you think of any additional noise that might be generated by this development, sir?
No, in fact, I wanted to touch on, one of the first slides Mr. Guerrero put up. The current zoning allows for bars, nursing homes, dry cleaners, service stations, drive-through establishments. And I think those are far more offensive. We're proposing something a little more harmonious with the neighborhood, with the residential use. And we do not plan on any sort of tennis courts or pool or anything of that nature out there. So I think it's probably the most harmonious use with the surrounding areas. If it's okay, Mr. Rice, I could certainly touch on the other 2 concerns she had, drainage and traffic, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, why don't you touch on the drainage, and then I might flip it back to Mr. Guerrero regarding the traffic, if that makes sense, Fred.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. With regards to the drainage, I just want to point out, I know most of the planning commission members that have seen me before in front of the commission are aware, but I want to make the public aware that's listening. I'm a licensed engineer, civil engineer. I designed these sites for approximately 18 years before I came into the development world. So when I speak to drainage and stormwater management, I'm very aware of it, in tune with it, and experienced in designing it and then now constructing it as well. We had our surveyors out there already on that back property line. I gave them kind of the marching orders. Let's make sure we put a great deal of focus on in-depth survey work out there to truly understand those drainage patterns. And our intent would be to ensure that we have an oversized retention pond to not just meet but exceed the code requirements for what needs to go in there, but also to ensure that we have the overland flow corridors to ensure the water gets there. You know, if we built that pond in the road as it drops down in elevation towards Hidden Hollow Court, we couldn't get the water to the pond. It certainly doesn't do us any good, and we would be exposing those residents to an undue amount of water. So we will pay incredibly close attention to drainage down there, whether it be by creating maybe a berm on that back portion of the property to ensure the water gets to us, and or adding additional catch basins and structures back there. So I want to offer to the residents adjacent to it, we will be very aware of it in our design. And as you mentioned, Mr. Rice, during the next steps, should this proceed forward, great deal of detail will go into that. And we will put a greater level as it pertains to a preliminary plan than we typically would. So at that time, we would have a really, truly good understanding of what we plan to do and what the current flow conditions are.
Thank you, Mr. Modick. Mr. Guerrero, anything additional regarding the traffic? I know we're chewing on this a lot, and it's well trodden ground, I know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is an ongoing thing because of the two high schools there and other traffic. And whether with this development or not, it's an issue. This development, one of the things, just to sidetrack, is the noise. If this was done single family, if it could be developed single family, there would be more houses there probably. There would be families making more noises. One thing good about condominiums or these units is they're really geared towards empty nesters, retirees, younger couples. It's not a whole bunch of kids. I know my house is a lot quieter now that my kids are out of the house. You know, it's just and cars and kids coming over, and I'm in my basement. This basement, you know, was really active when my kids were younger, but now we hardly use it. But it's just the way it is. And I think the development, what they want to do is going to be the least noisy, have the least amount of traffic. We can't stop development. And so when we look at development, we try to make it better. And one of those issues is what type of development, what does it look like? How is it designed? And then of course, traffic. And we're going to look into that. I mean, it's something that we've been hearing for since Hidden Lakes and Boulder went in. So,
thank you, Mr. Guerrero.
Mr. Rice, may I add something pertaining to the traffic?
Yeah, although I don't want to beat a dead horse here. I think but go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up a point Mrs. Tuttle mentioned with regards to the widening of Akron Peninsula. And kind of what I was alluding to earlier was providing frontage across our property. One of the biggest challenges with widening existing road infrastructure is having the right-of-way or easements to allow that to happen at a future time. When I mentioned earlier, that's what I was alluding towards, that we would provide the appropriate easements or right-of-ways to allow for widening and design ours to be harmonious with that.
Thank you, sir.
just one quick thing, just to let you know, typically what happens though, when you widen to 2 to 4 lanes, the traffic follows and it goes faster, and sometimes you get more traffic. So you just have to be careful.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. That's a valid point. And sometimes if it's a straightaway and it's wider, people feel more comfortable going faster. Ms. Tuttle, does that answer your questions that you had raised there, ma'am?
Yes, it did. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Tuttle. I see Mr. Parmenter, your hand is up again, sir. Just to let you know that, and I should have explained this previously, we like to let everybody have an opportunity first before we go back to a round 2. So before we go to you as a round 2, I'm going to have one last call for anybody else from the public who would like to provide comment during the public portion of the hearing. I want to be fair to give everybody a chance. And I know sometimes in these hearings, that's not why you're here, and I fully respect that. So please don't feel like you're obligated. I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to do it. So seeing no further hands raised, I will now then turn to Mr. Parmenter. If you would like to, if there's another point that you did not raise in your previous comments, please feel free to do so. But I hope it's a new point and not necessarily, continue to reiterate the same points if it's a new point, Mr. Parmenter.
Okay, well, and maybe that's not, then it was related based on some of the feedback, so I can withhold it if it matters. All I was going to highlight is your comments as we went on, where this is about the zoning and most appropriate use and consistent with development. And I think as I look at it, we've developed 3 neighborhoods going down State Road here that have all been developed in an RM overlay, which, if I understand right, is actually restrictive of the type of concerns that a number of the neighborhood have raised. And so I am unsure, and what I would ask everybody to consider when we're doing the zoning on this is that we are proposing using deed restrictions or other legal maneuvers as a means of mitigating that risk, where quite frankly, using the RM overlay seems like that would be in line with the prior 3 developments, as well as prevent that misdevelopment. And so I guess I would just encourage that, that be evaluated as consistent with the development happening and the most appropriate for use to prevent misuse of the zoning, or rely on a future, property plan to be restricted by a future member sitting in the seats for development on that space. And that's it.
That is helpful, Mr. Parmenter. Mr. Guerrero, any?
Yeah, I think, I just want to make one thing clear, though, that an RM overlay does allow for multifamily. So there could be.
I'm not arguing the multifamily, Fred.
Okay.
I'm actually with what's being developed there. I would be fine with it.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that we change this to a different zoning that permits far more than what is proposed in the event this doesn't get built. And all our intentions are good, that he's going to build that.
Yeah.
But if they go bankrupt tomorrow, who builds next, right? And so then we're going to be dealing with that question. And I guess I'm not sure why we would deviate from the last 3 neighborhoods on this one area, inconsistent with what's been happening in the this is a neighboring neighborhood to us. So I guess that's my highlight, is so when we're talking about appropriate use and consistent development, I guess I would expect to see us continue to develop in the manner in which it was done before, rather than going to an alternative zoning and then trying to propose reliance on deed restrictions or legal to prevent the incorrect or inappropriate usage of that property, which would seem less consistent to me.
Yeah, I understand you. I'm just saying that someone could come in and say, I want to add to your RM overlay, but I want to build some apartments, because the RM does allow that 3 different uses. So we'd have to be careful there. And we could have went this other route. And I think at this point, of coming up with those restrictions, we get to the same result. That's all.
Actually, that was a appropriate comment, Mr. Parmenter. So thank you so much for sharing that. Mr. Stams, it looks like you have your hand up again there, sir. So
Yes, thank you.
You get around too, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rice. And I just wanted to echo the Mr. Parmenter's comment. It sounds like there's an argument for the rezoning consistent with the other developments along State Road, but it sounds like the plan being proposed isn't quite there yet. I know that may sound very simplistic, but I like to keep it simple. So I just wanted to emphasize what Mr. Parmenter is saying, that's noted going forward, that from what I've heard tonight, as far as the plan, there's a lot of things, or maybe restrictions that need to take place. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Guerrero, you're looking at some slides.
No, yeah, I think we'll work on those restrictions, but I just want to, the RM is basically an R5 district. It's just packaged different. And you can see the only thing different that you can do in an R5 that doesn't state you can do it in RM is the nursing homes. Everything else could be done there. And so when someone comes in for an overlay plan, if Hidden Lakes wanted to put apartments in the beginning, they probably would have been able to do that. And so I think I'm just saying, I don't disagree with that, but you could have some of the same results. You could create the overlay, and then we add it to the overlay with these units, and then the developer then doesn't buy the property owner sell it to somebody else, and they could create the case that we want to redo the overlay to allow to do apartments. And so we would have the same potential issues, that's all. We just thought, again, that this was a cleaner way of doing it. And so I just wanted to reiterate that, that's all.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Councilman Stams. And Lori, my apologies, I did not actually have Mr. Parmenter or Councilman Stams restate their address, but I'm okay. All right, looks like you got it. All right, I want to make sure I'm following the rules. I try to follow the rules. Sometimes I slip up here. So thank you, Mr. Parmenter.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the public who would wish to speak on this file? Seeing no hands raised, I'm going to go ahead and close the public portion of this hearing and open it up to members of our planning commission. And I will call on you. And if you would not mind, just please weighing in on any questions or comments or concerns you have with this particular file. Commissioner Locascio.
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. I think it sounds like a great project. I like the idea of the residential properties being there. The last thing that I would like to see is somebody come in and do more commercial stuff along the front, and then we have a whole different set of issues to deal with the community behind it, because they, the noises and everything else that we've experienced in the past with other projects. So I'm in favor of the change in the zoning, and I look forward to going through the process of fine tuning. And I guess just along with the traffic, my first thought was what Fred said was about the traffic, the roundabout. And I know that you either love them or hate them, I guess, but it sure is a way to slow down traffic, but keep it moving at the same token. With Wyoga Lake coming out there, I mean, I'm in that area all the time, and I think that would be a great solution. And the widening is exactly what you said. The traffic seems to go faster. If you've got 2 lanes, you'll have passing and everything like that. But that's to be decided, at the next phase. But I am in favor of the rezoning. So I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Locascio. Commissioner Monaco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Guerrera, could you put the site plan up for us to look at?
Sure.
I have a few comments about that. And while Mr. Guerrera is doing that, I'm trying to recall, our legal counsel, I think, may be listening in, or someone from our department there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that in the past, we may have voted on a project that required a change in zoning. And actually, if that particular project did not go forward, it voided that revision to the zoning. It changed it. It was specific to that project. Now, I may be wrong, but I was under the assumption that that actually could happen. So this would be something I think I'd like to explore. In other words, if for some reason this project's a no-go, this is what we base the zoning change on. The zoning change doesn't apply. I may be wrong, but I'd like, perhaps if someone has any knowledge on that. I don't know if our legal representation is here this evening, but
I'm here. I don't know the answer to that. I can look into it, but if I'm wrong, Fred, tell me, but I suspect if you change the zoning, you change the zoning.
Typically that's what happens. I mean, I think planning commission, city council could not approve subdivisions or site plan approval if it doesn't meet what they thought. I mean, there are some legal ramifications for that, but I think we have a lot of power in how things are developed. And that's why I said is this development here is a preliminary. There are some things that, and Greg knows this, we've worked with him before, that we're going to want things a little bit different to protect the neighborhoods, to do other things. So I think we have some power in the future, but I think once it's zoned, it does change. But like I said, if we made it part of the overlay and the overlay says, these are the things you can do, that, you know, and it doesn't get built and another person buys it and said, well, this is what the overlay says I can do, which is the same as R5, and I want to build this, then our hands could be tied with that. So, so I think legally we want this development to be tied into this development. The developer said they want to do this. However, we don't have a crystal ball, you know, the market could crash, other things could happen in the next 6 months. But I think with some type of restriction, and that's where we'll talk to Matt about that, to put some type of restriction on that property. So it can't get any greater density to an extent, and it has to be either single family or attached.
Very good. Thank you, Fred. I just wanted to clarify that. At some point, we may have discussed that on the past projects, but you know, that's fine. A comment I have for Mr. Modick, in looking at the site plan, you know, there is a topography, but I don't know, Fred, can we blow that up a little bit? We could see what's low and high. I don't know if you can, but
I'll try.
But my question in any case is the retention basin, where it's located. There seems to me that there's opportunities to relocate that, but I don't know where the low spots are. And if that's possible, can we improve the location in terms of the neighbors and the actual residents? So maybe the pond is moved as soon as we get our site plan back.
I'm trying to do it, and I'm not being very successful at it.
It's not so easy to navigate with those things, but you know, it's directly behind the end units. And you know, if it could move to the top or bottom, if you will, of the site plan, based on topography, it might be better well received to not only the neighbors who are off the property, but the actual residents. So would you be willing to explore that, Mr. Modick?
Yes, I'd definitely be willing to explore that. I'd say that that kind of is the low point is along that common property line. A unique feature is the mound that was mentioned by one of the residents off Hidden Hollow Court, kind of right where the stormwater management pond is shown on our plan and coming up through those first buildings. There's kind of a ridge there that we're going to shave off. So that whole area on there is the lowest point. I think during our detail engineering design, what we want to make sure is the best possible spot for the outlet of our pond to ensure that it doesn't overflow then into their backyard. So we will study it. If we have an opportunity to move it, we certainly will.
Yeah, it just seems, you know, for let's say the residents of those end units on the property, okay, you know, if you're looking into a retention pond, it's fairly close to your unit, and then the neighbors would have, you know, a retention pond where there isn't one. So maybe if we could explore some of that, and I don't know, you know, without looking at the topography, et cetera, I'm not trying to second guess engineering background, but it seems to me that aesthetically and how things might work, it might deserve an opportunity to be improved as time moves on, if your plan is approved this evening, to study that and maybe, you know, make that whole area a little more acceptable to everyone. That development there the Hidden Lakes is a very nice development. I drove through there today, and I think it's well done. And this would be a development that would be a good neighbor as opposed to alternatives that might show up. Now, you, sir, have proposed the condominium housing in there, which I think would also be a very nice development and a good neighbor. And so I have no objections to it, okay, because I think there are many things that could go in there to cause all sorts of grief. So thank you for that. I think that project would work well, but my only concern at this point, and I know we're early on, is the retention ponds location. And I have no further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Monaco. Commissioner Habel.
Yes, actually, I was going the same route that Ed was going, Mr. Monaco was going with regard to the stormwater management. Certainly, the street and the buildings sort of follow the high point, allowing that road to be manageable. And then on the north and south, it looks like you've got sort of this topography that's dropping down. And to me, it looks like that stormwater management's kind of trying to pick up both sides of that. So maybe in the long run, it gets split and tied together. I think that's really an engineering concern, but certainly it looks like there's some barns on the far south and west corner, some outbuildings, with those are going to be removed, Greg?
Yes, we would be removing those buildings.
Okay, so there might be an opportunity to kind of massage some of that topo without being too creating too many issues, and certainly it's an engineering exercise, but it does want to natural as well, and I think that's maybe where Ed's going with as well. I think along that 40-foot setback, I agree that once this gets more into plan approval of everything, the exact plan, that I'd like to see some shielding there, whether the existing natural is there, it's good enough, or whether it has to be added, I think, along that edge on the south. Other than that, I support the project. I think it's a compatible use to that neighborhood, and certainly the issues of traffic are greater than just this project. And I think Mr. Guerrero mentioned that certainly that road does get more and more traffic, and then will need to be addressed for the whole community, not just the local residents, because it is pretty heavy at times. That's it.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Habel. Councilwoman Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also think that this project sounds like a good fit for the area. I'm also concerned about the traffic, but I was before this was proposed. So I've traveled through there quite a bit too. And so Fred, it's good to hear that the city may take a look at that and figure something out. And I just wanted to make the comment that we're fortunate because our stormwater rules are more stringent than anyone else's in Summit County. I think it maybe a year or two ago we passed that. So I'm just happy about that and like to make a point of it. And I thank you, Mr. Modak. I know you had to go by the more strict rules in previous projects as well. And it's for the good of all. So I appreciate that. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. And thank you, Councilwoman Nichols Rhodes. Appreciate it. Commissioner Ricker.
Yes, thank you. I'd also like the project. I do, in keeping with the aspect of the meeting, what we're supposed to do, I would also like to approve it, but with Fred's recommendation, or what he had mentioned earlier, that maybe we put some type of restriction on that, just in case, the bad thing that they have to go out of business or something to that effect, that we look at that. But overall, the project is good. And I really feel that it keeps with the harmonious of that neighborhood that's going out there. And of course, as this gets pushed through, we'll look at the other items more closely, the tree lines and traffic and everything else as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ricker. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. I want to thank the city for doing a very thorough job of reviewing the file. I want to thank the applicant, Mr. Modick, for your time and your thoughtfulness in responding to all the questions and concerns that are answered. And also want to thank our residents for all of your thoughtful comments. This is really the best way a process could work, is we get all the information out there, we learn new things, and with the ultimate goal of making the best possible development here in the city of Cuyahoga Falls. I want to thank Mr. Modick for investing in Cuyahoga Falls. You could invest other places, but you choose to invest here. I also want to thank you for your thoughtfulness in being responsive to the concerns that were raised tonight. Everything from regarding the setback to the traffic, to the retention pond, to drainage issues. I appreciate that. I don't take that for granted. I understand, the motivations here. We obviously want to have a very successful financial development for the developer, but really from the Cuyahoga Falls perspective, we want to have the best possible development for the city and for the residents, not only for today, but for future generations. I hear loud and clear these concerns regarding the retention pond. I appreciate them being raised by Commissioner Monaco, Commissioner Habel, well stated. And as you also well stated, that will be something that will be further fleshed out as we move forward into the site plan. I also appreciate the comments regarding traffic, Councilwoman Nichols Rhodes, Councilman Stams, Mr. Montgomery, and Ms. Tuttle. Very well stated. I also have traveled this section of roadway. I share your concerns. In some ways, I actually even share your frustration, because it almost seems like there has to be a certain volume. There's like a formula that either the Ohio Department of Transportation or don't get me wrong, I really like Mr. DeMassa. He's one of the best engineers around. He's got a formula he's got to comply with regarding road regulations. But I appreciate the commitment here by the city to study this and get it right, because clearly we've got to get it right, because we can't keep continuing to exacerbate a concern that we all have articulated here. And I'm confident that that will be done as we move forward. Mr. Parmenter, I appreciate your comments regarding consistent development. Well spoken, and a good point, and duly noted. And as Commissioner Ricker pointed out, I'm confident that we can put the proper language in there that would address that. So I am in support of this proposed zoning change. I think it's consistent, and I think it will actually further enhance our community. And so I actually don't have any other further questions or comments. I mean, I think you've heard my concerns, which quite frankly are your all concerns that I share. And at this point in time, I would entertain a motion on file number MAP-20-0027.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. The Planning Commission finds that the proposed map amendment for parcel 37-00221 from MU1 Rural Neighborhood Center to R5 Mixed Density Residential is consistent with Tamsin Park District, the Tamsin Park Neighborhood, and Northampton Planning District goals, long-range plans, and policies. A map amendment also meets R5 mixed density residential planning criterion, while attached single family is consistent with current land use characteristics in Hidden Lakes. Based on the above facts and other facts contained in the staff report, the Planning Commission recommends an R5 mixed density zoning map amendment for parcel 37-00221 parentheses 5008 State Road.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second before us. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda are the meeting minutes of August 18th, 2020. Those meeting minutes were sent out in advance, and so thank you very much, Lori, for your usual exceptional work. You do a great job, and I appreciate the work that goes into the meeting minutes. So at this point in time, I would entertain a motion on the meeting minutes of August 18th, 2020.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Locascio, a second by Commissioner Monaco. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Mr. Guerrera, are there any other items for the Planning Commission agenda this evening?
No other items.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any of the other commission members have any items for the agenda? I should probably also check with our fellow commission members. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you all very much. Good job this evening.
Thank you.